Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. This time, we're going to be exploring the world of Georgia real estate.
Oh, great topic.
I know a lot of you out there are interested in getting into real estate, whether you're buying your first home or maybe thinking about becoming an agent or even just, curious about how this whole thing works.
Yeah, it can seem pretty complicated from the outside.
Exactly. So we're going to try to break it down for you. We've got some great source material to work with today, including Georgia real estate licensing, regulations, and professional practices, which is like the Bible for anyone wanting to get licensed in the state.
Definitely a must read.
So we're going to do a deep dive into who the major players are, different types of properties you might encounter, what it actually takes to get licensed in Georgia, and even touch on some ethical considerations.
Yeah, ethics are super important in this business.
Absolutely. Okay,
Oh.
so imagine Georgia real estate is like a big stage production.
Okay, I like that.
Who are like the main actors in this production?
Well, first you got to have your developers, right? They're the ones who actually create the property.
Right, wait, they take like a raw piece of land and turn it into something you can actually, live in or work in.
Exactly. And then, of course, there are the investors, the people who are always on the lookout for a good deal, a good property to buy.
Right, they're the ones putting the money down hoping to make a profit.
And you can't forget about the brokers.
The negotiators.
Yeah, they're the ones who connect the buyers and sellers and help make those deals happen.
Right, like the middlemen or middlewomen, I guess.
Exactly. And they have like a whole team of people working for them too.
Oh, yeah. You've got the salespersons, the ones who are actually showing the properties, working directly with the clients.
Right. And there's appraisers who determine how much a property is worth, home inspectors who make sure everything's up to code, attorneys, all kinds of folks involved. It's a pretty big ecosystem.
It's a whole world. And speaking of that ecosystem, I'm curious about, we've talked about the people, but what about the actual properties?
Oh, yeah. It's not just houses in Georgia real estate. It's so much more. Our source, Georgia Real Estate, Licensing, Regulations, and Professional Practices, actually breaks down the types of properties into 6 categories.
6 categories. Wow. Okay, lay it on me.
You've got residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and then mixed use and special purpose.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack, but it sounds interesting. Can you give me an example of each?
Sure. So, think of a typical house in a suburb.
All right,
That's residential.
got it.
Commercial would be something like a shopping mall or an office building.
Okay, so places where businesses operate.
Exactly. And then industrial would be something like a factory or a warehouse.
Makes sense.
And then agricultural, that's, farmland, ranches, all that good stuff.
So Georgia peaches and pecans.
Exactly. And mixed use is kind of a combination. Think of a building that has apartments on top and shops on the ground floor.
Oh, yeah, those are becoming really popular, I've noticed.
They are. And then special purpose is kind of a catch-all for things like churches, schools, government buildings, stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so we've got the who and the what of Georgia real estate.
Mm.
But let's talk about the how, if someone actually wants to get involved in this market.
Right.
What's the first step? I'm assuming you need some kind of license.
You absolutely do.
Yeah.
Georgia's pretty strict about that. You can't just start selling houses without the proper credentials.
Makes sense.
Uh.
Yeah. So how do you actually get a real estate license in Georgia?
Well, first you got to be at least 18 years old, a resident of Georgia, and then you have to complete 75 hours of approved real estate courses.
75 hours. Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty rigorous process.
So it's not just like a weekend seminar. You really got to commit.
Oh, yeah. And then after you finish the coursework, you got to pass the state exam.
Okay, so like a big official test.
Exactly. And even then, even if you pass the exam, you're not like a free agent. You have to work under a licensed broker for at least 3 years.
Okay, so it's like an apprenticeship almost.
Kind of, yeah. They actually use this interesting analogy in one of our sources. They say that letting someone practice real estate without a license is like letting someone perform surgery without going to med school.
Oh, wow. Okay, that puts it in perspective.
Yeah, they call it schrumping, basically. You could really mess things up if you don't know what you're doing.
So they take consumer protection pretty seriously in Georgia.
Oh, yeah, they do. And the learning doesn't stop once you get your license either.
Oh, tell me more.
Yeah, even after you get your license, you got to complete a 25-hour post-licensing course within your first year.
Wow. So it's like you pass the test, you think you're done, and they're like, nope, more learning.
Exactly. And then every 4 years, when you renew your license, you have to take another 36 hours of continuing education courses.
Wow, they really want to make sure you're staying up to date.
Absolutely. The real estate world is always changing, new laws, new regulations, new market trends. So it's important to keep learning.
Right. So it's not just a one-time thing. You're constantly developing your skills and knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the licensing process, which sounds pretty intense. But let's say someone's made it through all that. They've got their license. They're ready to go.
Right.
How do they actually find a broker to work with? I mean, there's got to be a ton of options out there, especially in a state like Georgia.
There are. And it's a big decision. It's not something to take lightly.
I bet. It's like choosing your work family for the next few years.
Yeah, exactly. You want to find a broker who's a good fit for you, someone who has a similar approach to the business, who can offer you good training and support.
Right. And I'm sure the commission structure is important too.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. You want to make sure you're getting a fair deal. And also how available the broker is, how much mentorship they're willing to provide, all those things matter.
So location is probably a factor too, right? Like you probably want a broker who's close to where you want to work.
Yeah, proximity is important, but it shouldn't be the only thing you consider. I mean, think about it this way.
Okay.
You wouldn't choose a mentor just because they live down the street from you, right?
That's true. There's got to be more to it than that.
Exactly. You want someone who you connect with, who you can learn from, who can help you grow your business. And you also want to consider the firm's reputation, their values, do they align with yours?
Right. So it's about finding a good fit on multiple levels.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to interview multiple brokers before you make a decision. This is a big choice, so take your time, do your research, and find someone who's the right fit for you.
Okay, that's great advice.
Mm.
So once you've found a broker, what's next? Is there like a contract or something?
Yeah, there's something called an independent contractor agreement.
Okay, so that's the legal document that outlines the terms of your working relationship.
Right. It'll specify things like your commission split, any desk fees, and the responsibilities of both the broker and the salesperson.
So it's important to read that carefully and make sure you understand everything before you sign it.
Oh, absolutely. Don't just skim it. You want to know exactly what you're getting into.
So once all that's sorted out, the license, the broker, the agreement, what does a real estate salesperson actually do in Georgia? What's their day-to-day look like?
Well, a lot of it is working directly with clients, both buyers and sellers.
Right, I imagine that's a big part of it. People skills.
Oh, for sure. If you're working with a seller, you might be helping them list their property, marketing it, showing it to potential buyers.
Right, like hosting those open houses.
Exactly. You'd also be negotiating offers from buyers, helping the seller through the closing process.
So it's a lot more than just putting a for sale sign in the yard.
Oh, yeah, way more. And if you're working with a buyer, you'd be helping them find properties that meet their needs, taking them to showings, explaining the different neighborhoods.
Right. And probably helping them navigate the whole mortgage process too.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. So it's a really diverse role. You got to wear a lot of different hats.
Sounds challenging, but also pretty rewarding.
Definitely.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've met the players, explored the types of properties, and even delved into the licensing process and finding a broker.
Yeah, and we've just scratched the surface.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive into the ethical considerations of being a real estate professional in Georgia, the different brokerage structures, and even take a look at the exciting world of real estate investment in the Peach State. Welcome back to our deep dive into Georgia real estate. Last time, we really got into the nitty-gritty of who's who and what's what in this market.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We did. Now, I'm really curious to learn more about the business side of things. Like, what are the different ways you can structure a brokerage?
Oh, that's a great question. But before we jump into structures, there's one more thing we really need to touch on.
Yeah, what's that?
Ethics.
Ethics. I knew it was coming, but to be honest, I always think of real estate as this, like, fast-paced, deal-driven world.
It is.
So where do ethics really fit into all of that?
Well, they're crucial, maybe even more so in a market like Georgia, which is so competitive. Think about it this way.
Okay.
You're representing a seller, and you get an offer that's way below the asking price.
Right. The seller's probably not going to be too happy about that.
Exactly. But then another buyer comes along. This one's a close friend of yours, and they offer the full asking price.
Ooh, That's a tricky situation.
It is, because on the one hand, you want to help out your friend, right?
Yeah, and you're probably thinking about the bigger commission, too.
Exactly. But ethically, you can't let those things influence your decision.
So what do you do?
You got to put your client's interests first.
Even if it means losing your friend's offer.
Even then, the National Association of Realtors has this code of ethics, and it applies to everyone in the industry, not just realtors, and it's very clear about this. Your loyalty is to your client. You got to present all offers fairly and advise your client based on what's best for them, even if it means a smaller commission for you or potentially, jeopardizing a friendship.
Wow, that's tough. But I guess that's what it means to be a professional, right? Putting your personal feelings aside and doing what's right.
Exactly. It's not always easy, but that's the ethical thing to do.
Okay, so loyalty to your client is a big one.
Yeah.
What are some other common ethical dilemmas that come up in real estate?
Disclosure is another big one. Like, let's say you're listing a house that had some foundation issues a few years back,
Oh, okay.
but the owners had them fixed, so everything's good now. Do you have to tell potential buyers about those past issues?
That's a tough one. I mean, it might scare some buyers away.
Right. It might, but ethically, you're obligated to disclose anything that could affect the buyer's decision, even if it's something that's been fixed. Transparency is key.
So even though those problems are in the past, you still got to be upfront about them.
You do. It's about giving the buyers all the information so they can make an informed decision.
Makes sense. So ethical behavior in real estate, it's not just about being a nice person.
Right.
It's about protecting your clients and building a reputation for being trustworthy.
Exactly. And remember, if you violate the code of ethics, you can get in big trouble.
Oh yeah, I bet the Georgia Real Estate Commission doesn't mess around.
They don't. They can suspend your license, even revoke it in some cases.
Wow, so the stakes are pretty high.
They are. So it's really important to understand and follow the ethical guidelines.
Okay, I think we've covered the ethics part pretty well. Now, can we get back to those brokerage structures? I'm still really curious about the different options.
Okay, sure. So, like we mentioned earlier, in Georgia, you got to be affiliated with a broker for at least 3 years.
Right, kind of like an apprenticeship.
Exactly. But after those 3 years, you've got some choices to make.
Oh, okay, like what?
Well, you can go out on your own and become a solo broker.
So like set up your own shop.
Exactly. You're the boss, you call all the shots.
Sounds pretty tempting.
It can be, but it also means you're responsible for everything.
So if something goes wrong, it's all on you.
Yeah, that's the risk. If the business goes into debt or gets sued, your personal assets are on the line.
Oh, wow. So there's no separation between you and the business.
Nope, not with a sole proprietorship.
Okay, so maybe not the best option for everyone. What are some other ways to structure a brokerage?
You could form a partnership with other brokers.
So like team up.
Yeah, you can pool your resources, share expenses, and kind of spread the risk a little bit.
That makes sense. Strength in numbers, right?
Exactly. And you can also learn from each other, share expertise.
Right. Like if one person's really good at marketing and the other's great at negotiating, you can kind of complement each other's strengths.
Exactly. It's a great way to build a more well-rounded business.
Okay, partnership, that's another option. What else is there?
You could incorporate.
Incorporate, like become a corporation.
Yeah. There are a couple ways to do that. You could form a standard corporation or an LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company.
Okay, those sound a bit more complex.
They can be, but the main advantage is that they offer more legal protection.
Oh, okay, how so?
Well, with a corporation or an LLC, your personal assets are separated from the business's liabilities.
So if the business gets sued or goes bankrupt, my house and my car are safe.
Exactly. Your personal stuff is protected.
Okay, that's a big plus. I can see why that would be appealing.
It is. But, of course, there's a trade-off. There's more paperwork involved with a corporation or an LLC, more regulations to follow.
So more administrative overhead.
Yeah. And it can be more expensive to set up, too.
So it's like a trade-off between protection and simplicity.
Pretty much, yeah. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to choosing a brokerage structure. It really depends on your individual circumstances, your risk tolerance, your long-term goals.
Right, like a sole proprietorship might be fine for someone who's just starting out and doesn't have a lot of assets to protect. But if you're more established, a corporation might make more sense.
Exactly. It's a very personal decision.
Okay, well, that was really helpful. I feel like I have a much better understanding of the different brokerage structures now.
Great.
Okay, so we've talked about ethics, brokerage structures, and all the stuff that goes into becoming a real estate professional in Georgia.
Right.
But now I want to talk about something that I find really exciting.
What's that?
Real estate investment.
Yes. That's where the real money's at, right?
Well, hopefully. But seriously,
Yeah,
I know Georgia's a really hot market right now.
it is.
So what are some of the best investment opportunities in the Peach State?
Well, Atlanta is always a good bet. It's a major hub for business, so there's always demand for commercial and residential real estate.
Right, Atlanta, the big city.
Yeah.
But what about areas outside of Atlanta?
Oh, there are tons of opportunities. Like Savannah is really popular right now.
Savannah, yeah. The historic charm, the coastal vibes, I can see why people would want to invest there.
Exactly. And then you've got places like Augusta and Athens.
Okay, college towns, lots of young people, lots of energy.
Exactly. They're up and coming areas with lots of potential for growth. And we can't forget about agricultural land.
Oh, yeah, the pecan farms.
Exactly. With Georgia's strong agricultural industry, farmland can be a really solid investment.
So there's literally something for everyone.
Pretty much, yeah. Whether you're into big city living, coastal charm, or the peace and quiet of the countryside, Georgia's got it all.
That's amazing. Okay, but before anyone rushes out to buy a property, what are some things they should keep in mind when it comes to real estate investment in Georgia?
Well, like with any investment, it's important to do your research.
Right, don't just jump in blindly.
Exactly. Understand the local market trends, the different neighborhoods, the types of properties that are in demand.
So location, location, location.
Always important. And it's also a good idea to consult with a financial advisor. They can help you assess your risk tolerance, your financial goals, and make sure you're making a smart investment.
That's great advice. So do your research, talk to a professional, and don't be afraid to think outside the box when it comes to investment opportunities in Georgia.
Exactly. There's a lot more to it than just buying a house.
Okay, this is all super helpful, but I remember you mentioned earlier that there are some specialized areas within Georgia real estate.
Oh, yeah. We haven't even gotten to those yet.
Like, what were they again?
Farm brokerage, government services, and real estate securities.
Right, those do sound interesting. I mean, farm brokerage, that's got to be pretty different from selling houses, right?
Totally. It requires a whole different set of skills and knowledge. You got to understand agricultural practices, government subsidies, water rights, all that stuff.
Wow, so you got to be like a farmer and a real estate agent all in one.
Pretty much, yeah. If you're passionate about agriculture, though, it can be a really rewarding niche.
Okay, farm brokerage. What about government services? What does that entail?
Well, government agencies like the GSA, the General Services Administration, they often need help buying and selling property.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah, so they'll hire real estate brokers to handle those transactions. So you could end up selling a former military base or finding office space for a federal agency.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you're kind of working for the government in a way.
In a way, yeah, it's a very specialized area with its own set of rules and regulations.
Okay, government services, that's another one. What was the last one again?
Real estate securities.
Right, that one sounds a bit intimidating.
It can seem that way, but it's basically about investing in real estate through financial instruments.
Oh, okay, so instead of buying an actual property, you're buying like shares in a company that owns real estate.
Exactly. Things like REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, and REMICs, which are real estate mortgage investment conduits.
Okay, those are some big words.
They are, but the basic idea is that you're kind of pooling your money with other investors to buy into a larger real estate portfolio.
So it's a way to get into real estate without actually having to buy a property yourself.
Exactly. And it can be a good way to diversify your investments. But like with any investment, it's important to do your research and understand the risks involved.
Right, there's no such thing as a guaranteed return in real estate, or any investment for that matter.
Exactly. So yeah, those are just a few examples of the specialized areas you can explore in Georgia real estate. There's really something for everyone.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today.
We have.
I feel like I've gotten a crash course in Georgia real estate.
I hope it's been helpful.
It definitely has.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up completely, is there anything else we need to cover? Any other, like, key players or institutions in the Georgia real estate world?
Oh, yes. I almost forgot. The Georgia Real Estate Commission, or GREC. We've mentioned them a few times, but we haven't really explained what they do.
Oh, right, GREC. They're the ones who issue the licenses, right?
They do, but they do a lot more than that. They're basically the watchdog of the industry. They oversee everything related to real estate in Georgia.
Okay, like what kind of stuff?
Well, they set the licensing requirements, they enforce the code of ethics, and they investigate any complaints against licensees.
So if someone's not playing by the rules, GREC can step in and take action.
Exactly. They have the power to suspend or even revoke licenses.
Wow. So they're kind of like the real estate police.
In a way, yeah. Their main goal is to protect consumers and make sure the real estate market in Georgia is fair and ethical.
So they're looking out for the buyers and sellers.
Exactly. They want to make sure everyone's treated fairly and that no one's taking advantage of anyone else.
Okay. That's good to know. It's nice to know that there's someone watching over the industry, making sure everything's on the up and up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered the players, the properties, the licensing, the ethics, the brokerage structures, the investment opportunities, and even GREC.
I think we've pretty much covered it all.
Wow. We did a deep dive for sure.
We did.
So I guess the only thing left to do is wrap things up and offer some final words of wisdom to our listeners.
Sounds good to me.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Georgia real estate, and wow, have we covered some ground.
We have, from the different players to the licensing process, ethics, even those specialized areas like farm brokerage.
It's been quite the journey. But, I'm thinking about our listeners out there. Some of them might be feeling a little overwhelmed with all this information.
Yeah, it can be a lot to take in.
So if you had to boil it all down to just a few key takeaways for someone just starting out in Georgia real estate, what would they be?
Okay, let me think. First and foremost, I'd say, remember that Georgia's real estate market is constantly evolving.
It's dynamic.
It is.
Yeah.
So you got to be adaptable, willing to learn and grow. And also, don't be afraid to, specialize.
Oh, yeah. Find your niche.
Exactly, whether it's residential, commercial, or one of those unique areas we talked about.
Right. Like maybe you're passionate about historic homes or you love working with first-time buyers.
Exactly. Find what you're good at, what you enjoy, and focus on that.
That's great advice. What would your second takeaway be?
Never stop learning.
Education, professional development.
Exactly. Georgia has a pretty rigorous licensing process, and there's a reason for that. They want to make sure everyone in the industry is competent and ethical.
Right. Remember that Schrault analogy.
Exactly. So take those pre-licensing courses seriously, complete your post-licensing requirements, and stay up to date with your continuing education.
It's an investment in your future.
It is. The more you know, the more successful you'll be.
Okay. 2 great takeaways so far. What's your third one?
Find a mentor.
A good broker.
Exactly. Someone who can guide you, support you, share their knowledge and experience.
Right. Especially in those first 2 years when you're just starting out.
It's crucial. A good mentor can make all the difference.
Okay, those are some fantastic takeaways. I feel like they really capture the essence of what we've been talking about.
I hope so.
And, before we say goodbye, I just want to emphasize one more thing that we've touched on throughout this deep dive.
Okay, what's that?
Ethics.
Yes.
Wow.
Ethics.
It's so important in this business.
It is. Your reputation is everything in real estate.
Exactly. So always be honest, be transparent, put your client's interests first, and follow the code of ethics.
You'll never go wrong if you do that.
Words to live by. Well, I think that about wraps it up for our deep dive into Georgia real estate.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
We did. I learned so much, and I hope our listeners did too.
Me too.
So, to everyone out there who's thinking about getting into Georgia real estate, whether you're a buyer, a seller, or an aspiring agent, we wish you all the best on your journey.
Good luck.
And remember, the Georgia real estate market is full of opportunities. Just do your research, stay informed, and never stop learning.
Well said.
Yeah. That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time with another fascinating deep dive.